On a chilly evening in mid-November 1966, Alexander Thompson was meant to meet his end. The plan had been carefully laid out, the payment made in full, and a skilled gunman selected for the job. Everything aligned perfectly. Vincent Rossi's crew had issued the directive, and the lingering supporters of Anthony Moretti sought payback for old grudges. The Italian organized crime families had concluded that Harlem's dominant figure had enjoyed his reign long enough. Yet Alexander Thompson did not perish that night. He carried on for nearly 2 more years, passing away peacefully in 1968 from a heart condition in his own home, amid the vast network of influence he had meticulously constructed over decades. The key to those additional years, the factor that allowed him to depart as a respected leader rather than a forgotten victim in some dark Harlem backstreet, stemmed from a woman whose existence remained entirely unknown to the outside world. A woman Alexander never truly comprehended. A woman whose name never surfaced in casual street talk, never echoed in underworld discussions, and never appeared in any official records. Her name was Clara Bennett. This is the tale of how one woman's steadfast devotion preserved the life of America's most influential African-American underworld leader, and how Alexander Thompson lived out his days without ever grasping the full extent of who had truly shielded him. Clara Bennett would arrive at Alexander Thompson's elegant townhouse on 142nd Street precisely at 7 in the morning every Monday and Thursday. For nearly a decade, she had kept the place impeccable, scrubbing the hardwood floors until they gleamed, laundering the fine sheets and towels, stocking and organizing the pantry with care. She blended into the background like so many household workers do. Essential yet overlooked, always there but rarely acknowledged. At 44, she was a widow raising a son who was studying to become a teacher at a college upstate. Her adult life had been spent serving in the homes of prominent figures, lawyers, physicians, successful entrepreneurs. She knew the value of keeping things private. She understood that whatever unfolded behind those closed doors stayed there. Her steady employment relied on her ability to remain discreet and silent. Alexander Thompson's residence followed the same unspoken rules. Clara dusted the furniture, polished the silver when needed, prepared light meals on days when the usual cook was unavailable. She earned $75 a week, a generous sum when she began in the late 1950s, and even more comfortable by the mid-1960s. She never pried into private matters. She avoided sharing stories with neighbors or friends. She never brought up the people who came to see Alexander or the nature of their talks. But Clara wasn't as unnoticed as Alexander assumed. She noticed every detail, and crucially, she made sense of what she noticed. She could identify the Italian crime figures who sometimes dropped by for meetings. Their faces were familiar from newspaper photos and headlines. She picked up on the subtle shifts in tone during those discussions, the underlying strain, the veiled warnings wrapped in polite words. She eavesdropped subtly while running a cloth over shelves or arranging fresh flowers in vases. She paid attention while straightening the living room cushions or wiping down the kitchen surfaces. Over those 8 years, Clara had gathered a wealth of unspoken knowledge. She knew which guests left Alexander looking tense or unsettled. She recognized when talks concluded with handshakes and mutual understanding, and when they ended with cold stares and implied consequences. She sensed the ebb and flow of Alexander's operations, periods of growth and prosperity, times of caution and pullback, moments when outside forces pressed harder. Clara also grasped something deeper, something that escaped most people in that shadowy world. She understood Alexander Thompson's hidden weaknesses. The townhouse's design left him exposed in ways he might not have fully realized. There were several ways in and out, windows that could be reached from the side alley or nearby roofs, a rear door that led directly from the kitchen to the outside, and a master bedroom positioned where someone determined could get a clear line from an overlooking building. Having spent years tending to every nook and cranny, Clara had a mental map of potential dangers that rivaled any professional security assessment. She had never brought it up with anyone. She hadn't offered suggestions for better locks or bars on windows. She never voiced worries about safety. She simply took it all in, filed it away, and bided her time until her insights might prove vital. That critical moment came in November 1966. Clara was in the kitchen, getting things ready for Alexander's supper, chopping fresh herbs, seasoning a pot of stew that would simmer slowly, when the front bell sounded at around 5:30. It was an odd hour. Alexander's serious discussions usually happened late at night or in the early hours before dawn. Afternoon callers were uncommon and often carried weighty importance. Clara stayed put in the kitchen, focusing on her tasks with deliberate care, but her ears strained toward the voices drifting through the halls. Alexander's tone was steady and even, as always, the voice of a man who had faced countless threats without flinching. The visitors sounded more restless, words tumbling out with urgency. Clara paused briefly over the cutting board, knife hovering. As fragments reached her, she resumed slicing carrots and onions, keeping her movements routine, but her thoughts raced to piece together the meaning. Alexander responded coolly, probing for details. Then the visitor laid it out plainly. Between 9 and 11 that next night, once it was fully dark, the man would slip in through the rear alley, climb the fire escape to the bedroom window. A single, clean shot. By the time anyone official showed up, he'd be long gone. Clara's pulse quickened, but she kept chopping rhythmically. Bedroom window via fire escape. Tomorrow evening, roughly 9 to 11. She had absorbed the core facts. The rest of the exchange dragged on with numbers and assurances, but Clara had what mattered. The visitors soon left. Alexander retreated to his office upstairs. Clara finished preparing the meal, served it to him with her usual quiet efficiency, chatting lightly about the weather or the market prices if he initiated, as if the afternoon had been utterly ordinary. She had long ago learned that in moments of potential crisis, the best approach was unwavering routine. Any hint of unusual behavior, any sign she had overheard could unravel everything. She wrapped up her work by 7:30 and headed out, catching the subway toward her home in the Bronx. As the train rattled along, Clara weighed her choices, decisions that could mean life or death for the man whose home she kept spotless. Clara recognized the delicate balance of influence and information in worlds like Alexander's. Secrets held value. Awareness could shift outcomes. She had both, but turning them into protection required finesse. Going to the authorities wasn't an option. Too many connections ran through those channels, some loyal, others not. A tip could backfire spectacularly. Telling Alexander outright would likely provoke him. He was proud, accustomed to handling threats head-on, and direct confrontation might escalate things prematurely. She had to work indirectly, passing the warning through trusted layers in his circle, preserving her anonymity and the boundaries of her role. By the time she reached her stop, Clara had settled on a course of action. It carried risks, crossing lines she had avoided for years, stepping closer to the dangerous side of the life she serviced from the edges. But it felt like the only viable path. In a quiet neighborhood in the Bronx, away from familiar eyes, Clara located a public phone booth. She dialed a number she had committed to memory from paperwork she had seen while organizing Alexander's desk, a contact linked to one of his key associates, a man named Raymond Hayes, who bridged everyday business and the more shadowed dealings. The line rang several times before a gruff voice answered. Clara spoke in code at first, a short phrase she had overheard in passing conversations over the years. Check 7 for 9. A pause followed, filled with street sounds on the other end. She fed more coins into the slot as time ticked. Finally, Raymond came on. "Who is this? What do you know?" Clara laid it out swiftly and precisely, the predicted timing, the method of entry. The specific access point, the window of vulnerability. She omitted how she knew, focusing only on the facts. It's set for tomorrow night, professional job, coming from Vincent Rossi's side. Raymond pressed for more. This is detailed. How reliable? I know because I've been around long enough to recognize real threats when I hear them. That's irrelevant. What matters is getting word to Alexander without delay. Quietly. If word leaks that someone tipped him, they'll move faster, maybe even tonight. He considered her words. Name? None. I'm the one who keeps his place in order. I'll be back on schedule next week, same as always. I want to keep doing that and stay healthy. Verify it your way, but carefully. She hung up before he could argue, stepping back into the evening air, her mind buzzing with the weight of what she had set in motion. By late that night, ripples spread through Alexander's network. Raymond mobilized quietly, extra watchers placed around the townhouse, reinforcements alerted, defenses strengthened without fanfare. Alexander received a vague but urgent alert about a possible move against him the next evening, details matching what Clara had passed along, but no mention of the source. He took it seriously. His survival had always depended on heeding credible warnings. He adjusted plans accordingly, increasing presence without outward alarm. The following night, the hired gunman crossed from downtown, approaching with caution. He scoped the alley, eyed the fire escape, prepared his approach. But the townhouse had changed, shadowy figures on adjacent roofs, lights strategically placed, the targeted window secured with new barriers, movement inside suggesting readiness. The professional sensed the compromise immediately. The job was blown. He withdrew without engaging, reporting back that unexpected vigilance had forced abandonment. Vincent Rossi, hearing of the failure, shelved any further plans. The botched attempt implied Alexander's information sources ran deeper than anticipated, perhaps even a leak in their own ranks. It introduced doubt, making future risks unappealing. Alexander continued, guiding his operations through transitions, mentoring his successor James Carter in the nuances of power during those pivotal early days, solidifying structures that would endure. He passed in the summer of 1968, suddenly while enjoying a late meal at a favorite local spot, heart giving out amid friends and familiar surroundings, a ruler to the end. Clara kept her routine, showing up Mondays and Thursdays, maintaining the townhouse as impeccably as ever. Alexander occasionally remarked on her thoroughness, even raising her pay a couple of times without explanation. He seemed to appreciate her reliability, sensing there was more to her quiet presence than met the eye, but he never delved deeper. After Alexander's passing, Clara stayed on briefly as James Carter rose, observing the shift with the same attentive silence. She noted how James navigated alliances differently, more aggressively in some ways, yet she never stepped in again. That one act in 1966 had been enough, a quiet affirmation of her own capacity to influence when it counted. She retired in the early 1970s, having saved sufficiently to support her son's career and secure a modest home in a peaceful area. She distanced herself fully from that world, never sharing her story with family or anyone else. It remained hers alone. Decades later, a historian researching Harlem's underworld past interviewed elderly residents, including Clara, then in her later years, living simply and privately. He asked gently about her time working for Alexander Thompson, wondering if she ever felt connected to his larger world. Clara thought for a moment, then replied softly, "I was there. Part of keeping things running smoothly." Did it ever feel like more than just a job? She smiled faintly, eyes distant. Sometimes you see things that matter, things that could change everything, but you do what feels right, quietly. He probed a bit more about specific events, but she steered away. Some things are better left unsaid. They happened, and that's enough. The historian used parts of their talk in his work, noting how overlooked staff often held unique views on power, but he respected her wish to remain unnamed. Clara lived into the mid-1990s, passing peacefully in her sleep. Her family remembered her fondly. History largely did not. Yet her quiet choice that November evening reshaped outcomes, an empire stabilized, a transition smoother, lives altered, all from a woman who listened intently and acted decisively from the shadows. People later debated Alexander's longevity, crediting his sharp instincts, his web of contacts, his strategic mind. No one pointed to the woman who cleaned his home. Few realized that those on the periphery, the unseen workers sustaining daily life, often formed the true backbone of such empires. That was Clara's quiet triumph, not fame or credit, but the private certainty that her loyalty and courage had real impact. She never craved recognition. She simply carried on tending to her duties, holding her truth close with the same care she brought to every task. And in that, perhaps, lies the deepest insight. True protection, offered without demand for thanks, reveals the purest strength of character. Alexander Thompson never knew a devoted household worker had safeguarded his life. He never fully saw the subtle supports upholding his world. But her unseen role made her influence profound, proving that power can reside in the quietest corners, in the most unassuming hands.